We heard what the politicians expect from today's medium-term budget policy statement. We are now joined by economic analyst Mr. Abdul Waheed Patel from Ethicor to give us some ideas on issues that will impact on this year's statement. Sir, good morning and thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Good morning.
I think just for the sake of clarity, what is the medium-term budget policy statement and why is it sometimes referred to as a mini-budget?
Well, it's referred to as the mini-budget because it takes place in the middle of government's fiscal year, and what it really is an opportunity for the government, and in particular the Minister of Finance and the National Treasury, to talk to the nation about what government's performance has been in implementing its fiscal plan and how the revenue has been managed of government in the previous financial year, what that translates into how government can spend in terms of revenue received by the National Treasury in the next year and the further 2 years coming. So it's an opportunity also for government to look at the performance of the economy, how its role in stimulating the economy through the utilization of government funds and public funds through government programs and other public service programs have performed, and what adjustments they need to make for the 2 to 3 years going forward are, and what impact they project that having on the economy. So it's really an exercise also in forecasting, looking at the historical performance of the economy over the last 4 months and what government would like to see and how it would want to do that in the coming 2 to 3 years.
All right. Now, earlier on we had various political parties in the studios with us, and many of them said, look, yes, the situation is not as good as what they would like it to be within the economy, but we're not yet at a place where, we're not yet in a crisis. I mean, I think Mr. Harris from the Democratic Alliance said, look, the storm clouds are gathering. We're not in the storm yet, but the storm clouds are gathering. Is that your assessment of the economy at this moment?
I think what's important to acknowledge is that globally, economies in both the developing world and the developed world are in a situation that's unprecedented. Growth has slowed down globally, and globally the expectations are that we're not going to see a significant uptake in growth in economies all over the world in a significant way that moves us out of this major economic slump that we're seeing globally anytime within the next 18 months. So yes, it is a crisis because we've never been in this situation before, but it's not a crisis that government is not designed to address. That's why government has fiscal policies. That's why government, and this government in particular, has taken a counter-cyclical approach so that it's able to ride the storm when markets are down. And this counter-cyclical approach has been adopted by government in light of the downturn that it saw in the economy when the first recession came. So the trick for government is how does it respond to the latest developments in the economy? What kind of pronouncements will we see the minister take today that says, yes, this government and the National Treasury in particular is still in charge of the management of the economy through the utilizations of various tools like fiscal policy. All
right. Now, the MTBPS also comes in the wake of Marikana, as well as the recent downgrading of South Africa's sovereign credit ratings. Do you expect the minister to touch on these two things when he delivers the medium-term budget this afternoon?
I think the minister will touch on it. He won't wish it away. They've happened. There are processes that government have initiated with other social partners to deal with, for example, the unrest in the mining sector, not just Marikana, but other areas in the mining sector, and what the implications of that are for the economy. But the Treasury has acknowledged what the downgrades by both Moody's and Standard & Poor's amount to for the economy. They've expressed a contrary view on it and why they have that view. So I expect the minister will talk about it, but I don't think he will be over elaborative about it. I think it will probably get mentioned once or twice in the speech. He may want to re-emphasize why government doesn't agree with the view on the downgrade, or now that government has understood the reasons for the downgrade, what its approach is going to be to reassure not just credit ratings agencies, but investors with a view to having confidence in the economy going forward. It's not the single biggest issue that he has to confront in this MTBPS. There are multiple issues.
Right. And then there's the matter raised by the president a couple of weeks ago of salary and bonus freezes to top officials, both in the public as well as in the private sector. Do you think that the minister will talk about that? And if so, what is his likely response going to be?
Well, I think in the first instance, if he does talk about it, it will be within the context of what's happened in the mining industry and the social unrest, because that agreement flows from those processes. I think there has been a view expressed by economists and analysts that particularly in the higher echelons of earners in the economy, this pay freeze may put a stranglehold on revenue coming into the fiscus through tax income. We've heard figures of sort of the upper band of 5 billion per annum. Now, that does create an economic problem for the fiscus, because that, if it is the case, then it's 5 billion rand that's not coming to the fiscus. That is significant in a constrained fiscal environment like the one we have now. So I think he probably will talk about what the options are in managing the current situation with regard to social unrest in the mining sector. That issue of pay freezes is one of them.
All right. And then do you think the minister is going to downscale our growth targets?
Well, certainly we know already that economic growth has slowed down, manufacturing has slowed down. So the issue is the economy is not performing at the level of growth that he wanted to when he tabled the initial budget, the national budget for the current year in February. I suspect there will be a lowering of the growth target, but I think he will take a view for the next 2 to 3 years and say, well, this is the target we want to aspire to in the next 2 to 3 years. This is the government plan for achieving that. This is what government will be injecting into the economy through various programs to try and attain that target.
Right. And then there's the matter of the white elephant in the room, the spending on Ngandla. Do you think the Minister Pravin Gordhan will say something about the 200 million plus that's been set aside for the development of the president's rural village?
I think it's highly unlikely that he will get into the details on that matter.
Okay. Right. I had to try. And then finally, I think, what is it that you would like to hear coming from the minister this afternoon?
I think what's important is for the minister to say to not just the business community and investors and analysts and market watchers, but to ordinary South Africans, that this is not a situation of doom and gloom. The situation that the South African economy finds itself in, on one hand, is a situation that we're seeing happening globally. In fact, in many instances, we're better off compared to many other economies, even developed economies that have generally performed strong, including the US, where we've seen the debate around not just budget deficits, but around bailouts for government and public entities themselves. I think what's important is for the minister to take stock of what our current approach to economic policy and management of the economy and fiscal policy is, to say, well, this is not working, this is the fine-tuning and readjustment that we are needing to do in the next year with a view to improving on the situation in the next 2 to 3 years, to say that government understands what's happening in the economy, what the critical factors are, what's problematic, what's doing really well, and how we can build on those successes and replicate that going forward. I think it needs to be a message of hope. It can't be just a message of doom and gloom.
But in all of that doom and gloomness, just before we let you go, we are not alone. There are countries, even the United States of America finds itself in the same predicament, doesn't it? So we're not alone.
We're not alone. I think the minister does have certain things in his pocket that he can work with. South Africa is now, for the first time, the first African country and one of only 4 developing economies to be included in the World Government Bond Index. Now, that says to us that investors out there have confidence in buying South African bonds on the international market because they believe it represents fair investment value. So much as we've got these wildcat strikes and unrest in critical sectors of the economy like mining, slowing down in manufacturing, there is still enough hope that investors have in this economy, that this economy has longevity.
All right. Mr. Patel, we really appreciate you coming in and being on our program this morning. Thank you very much, sir. Now, after the break, we recap on this week's member statements. We ask you to please stay with us.